In this video, I'm going to show you about 15 ways that you can make your lead synths and sounds more exciting, more powerful, more professional, just overall sound better. Before we get started, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you get more videos like this one. So there we go. All right, let's get started. Number 1, saturation. Saturation is a great tool because it adds a perceived loudness to your sound, some grittiness, some warmth, brightness. Overall, just makes it sound more exciting by increasing the drive of your sound. This first example I have is a lead inside of Slate Digital and Sonic Academy's Anna 2, synth that I'm going to be using throughout the video and I'll talk more about later. The preset is called Anna Airways. This is what it sounds like. So I'll drop the saturator on there and I'll push the drive up until it starts to sound like it's pretty aggressive and loud, but not over distorted. And I can turn down the output just to compensate for the increase in volume. Right here, it starts to get a little bit over distorted, so I'll dial that back a little bit. And we can take a listen before and after. This is another Anna 2 lead called Buzz Block, and let's listen in the context of the mix with this sound, saturator off and on. Overall, it just feels more powerful and full. For softer sounds, you can add a little bit less saturation, but for gritty sounds, you can really push this quite a bit. Number 2 is going to be adding white noise to your sound. Just like saturation, this is going to make your sound feel fuller and more exciting. Depending on the synth you're using, you might have a white noise oscillator or a sample of white noise. And if you don't have that, then you can layer it up with another synth that does have a white noise oscillator. Inside of Anna 2, to get the white noise oscillator, you can choose it in the sampler. You go into factory, noise, and white noise. This is what the sound sounds like before the white noise. As I increase the volume of the white noise, you'll hear how much more exciting it sounds. It's great for automating and making build-ups, or just making your lead feel a bit more powerful. Number 3 is going to be layering your sounds with different cutoffs. If I take this first synth here and duplicate that, I can increase the cutoff in the first layer. I can go into the filter of the second layer and lower the cutoff of this one. Now this layer is split into 2 and I have more control over the lower and the higher portions of the sound, which gives me more options for creativity, EQing, and mixing. Not only that, but together they kind of just sound more full because we're doubling up some of those frequencies. Number 4 is going to be layering different octaves. So just like we're layering here with the different cutoffs, you can also change the octaves to make it more interesting. So I can go into here and I can just drag up or down the octave of this synth. And take a listen with the other layer. So by dragging that octave down, it feels much more full and aggressive. Number 5 is going to be layering different sounds. So I have this first layer here, and I have this second layer here. I just layer those together. And we get this awesome synth that sounds better layered than each synth on their own. Bonus tip, make sure you're EQing properly and you're not overlapping too many frequencies. Remember, you can download this project in the link in the description below. If you don't have Anna 2, you can still get the sounds because I will be bouncing them down into audio. Number 6 is going to be using Ableton's algorithms to bounce out your audio and then change the octave. It's a long tip name. but it's really cool. Probably one of the best tips in this video. If I take this sound and duplicate it, freeze and flatten, it's going to change that MIDI into an audio file. Within this audio file, I can double click, go into the transposition and change that up or down an octave. And that's going to sound different than if you were to change the octave in the actual synth. So let's go to the synth, change the octave down, take a listen. And then let's take a listen to the audio file that we took down an octave. So it sounds much grittier, much more aggressive. And this is just on the Beats algorithm. If we change this to something like Complex Pro, it sounds even more different. And I can change these formants to change the style even more. And we can go up an octave to see how that sounds. Sometimes this can sound even better than if you change the octave inside the actual synth, and it just gives you so many more creative options by giving you these harmonics from the sound that you might not be getting from the synth itself just by changing the octaves inside of the synth. If you're looking to try a new synth, you should definitely check out Anna 2. Right now, they're offering a free month for their all access bundle. So you can get Anna 2 as well as a bunch of sample packs, all of Slate Digital's other plugins. The all access pass, you get instant access to all their new packs as well. So I've used some of those new packs in the video. So if you like those sounds, then you can actually get those right away. Put the link to that in the description below in case you want to check it out for that free month. All right, back to the video. Number 7 is going to be using pre-delay. I see a lot of producers neglect the pre-delay setting on their reverb. It's actually pretty important. The pre-delay gives a small gap in between the original sound and the reverberated processed sound. This allows for the original sound to punch through before the reverb gets added on, which can sometimes kind of bog down the sound or make it feel a little bit muddy. Essentially, it's just giving that little bit of breathing room to make your sound hit more clean before the processing kind of comes in and takes over. So I have this reverb, I have the dry wet up very high so you can really hear the actual gap, and I have the pre-delay maxed out. So without the pre-delay, we just hear that reverb right away. Just the sound hits and then it's reverb. With the pre-delay, we'll hear a very short gap of 250 milliseconds. See if you can hear it. What I'm aiming for when setting the pre-delay is starting at around 30 to 50 milliseconds usually and going up until I hear that gap and then dialing back maybe 10 or 20%. Right there sounds pretty good to me, and I can dial back the dry wet maybe a little bit less. It's pretty hard to hear, and it's more obvious on some sounds than other sounds, but just keep in mind that you're allowing that first initial hit to really come through and allow for that breathing room of the sound. Number 8 is using delay to create rhythmic patterns. To create these rhythmic delays or these stylistic delays, you have these different numbers which are going to change the timing of the repeating signal. If I change this to different numbers by turning off this chain, then I can create these really cool rhythmic patterns with the delay. Keep in mind that we want at least 50% so that it does feel like it's repeating the same volume for the first hit or two, but you can go even further if you want it to be more of an atmospheric type of rhythm. And trying different timings. Having 50% will have more of a rhythm and less of an atmosphere because it's going to be repeating the first or second note pretty much the same volume, so it sounds like you're just playing more than one note in succession. Number 9 is sidechain compressing your return tracks. So if you want to be using a bunch of delay or reverb, but you don't want to be kind of covering up the original sound, you can use sidechain compression on a return track to really allow your initial sound to punch through the mix while also getting that nice reverb or delayed signal. So I have the lead here. I want to send that into a return track. I'm going to send it all the way, open up the return track, and I just have some EQing. The delay is at 100% dry wet because it's in a return track, so we want to make sure that we have that at 100%. And then my feedback is really high. I can even throw a reverb in here as well. Last, I'm going to throw a compressor on there. We can turn on the sidechain, and I'm going to sidechain from the synth that is playing and sending to it. So the Ana2 high cut here, which is this channel that I'm sending to the return track. And now I can reduce that threshold until I'm getting a nice compressed signal. So when the original sound is playing, it's going to be triggering the sidechain compression and squishing down the processed signal. So when the lead notes are playing, it's going to punch through the mix, but when they're not playing, it's going to fill that empty space with a nice reverb and delay. And we can listen with and without the sidechain compression. Number 10 is going to be freezing your reverbs to make them into more interesting sounds. I have another Ana2 lead here called Ancient Staccato, and it sounds like this. So with this sound, I'm going to actually record the reverb of it to turn it into a pad. Insert an audio track. In that audio track, I want to change my external in to resampling. Hit the record button. I'm going to put my dry wet all the way to 100%. Once I hit record, I'm going to hit the freeze button, which is going to freeze that reverb sound, and I'm going to record that in the resampling track. Turn off the freeze, and now I have this lead turned into a pad synth. I can throw another reverb on there to make it sound much softer and more like a pad. I can fade it out, and I can duplicate it. What's great about this is it's going to match the theme of your track because you're using a synth that is already being used in your track to create this like textural pad in the background. Number 11 is going to be using chorus. Very simple, just grab a chorus, throw that on your lead sound, and it's going to give it just a hint of a little bit of modulation. So I'll throw it on this sound here. Another preset called Acoustic Harp on Vinyl. Turn up the feedback a little bit. Maybe the amount. And we listen before and after. It's not groundbreaking, it's not a huge amount of difference, but that little bit of chorus can make it subconsciously more interesting. Even dialing in just a little bit can make the sound feel more interesting over a longer period of time. Number 12 is more voices and detune. So just like the layering up of the sounds, making it feel fuller and more exciting, just adding more voices and a little bit of detune, similar to how the chorus sounds, can make your sounds feel more full and more interesting and professional. Let's go to the first lead here. As I increase the voices, you'll hear that it gets a little bit louder and more full and wider. And as I increase the detune, you're going to hear it get much wider and a little bit more movement, and it's going to sound a lot more interesting. Number 13 is going to be the Haas Effect. This is something I use in every track. The Haas Effect is a stereo delay between one side and the other, either from left to right or right to left. And it just sounds like the sound is kind of just branching from one side and going to the other, but it isn't in a way that you really notice, and it feels really wide and interesting. I'll show you how to make this just with a simple delay. Throw that delay on the sound, dry wet 100%, feedback 0, and then you turn the chains off, both of these to time. One of the sides goes to 1 millisecond, and the other you can change between 7 milliseconds roughly and about 40 milliseconds. This is a sweet spot between 7 and 40. Anything less doesn't really sound good. Anything more, you start to hear the difference between the two. But between that number, it sounds like one sound, just very wide. If I go too far, you hear it kind of jump, but staying under 40, sounds nice and wide. Keeping in mind, you don't usually want to do this to lower sounds, anything below 300 or 400 hertz. So you could also filter some of that out. Maybe layering up sounds and using only the highs for the Haas effect and the lows you keep in the middle of your mix. Number 14 is going to be mid-side EQ boosting. So if you don't use mid-side EQ already, it is a great tool. So you grab an EQ, throw that onto a channel, so you change this from stereo to mid-side mode. Now you can EQ specifically the signal that is mono in your mix, as well as the signal that is specifically stereo in your mix. So what you can do is actually boost up the high end of your sound, and it will give this nice stereo sparkle in the very wide parts of your mix. While we're using mid-side EQ, it is also a good idea to remove any stereo imaging from around 200 Hertz and below. So I can turn on the filter here, remove that, and then I can go back to mono, and I can just slightly boost this if I like to compensate for that bit that we're taking out. And let's take a listen before and after. The sides feel a little bit brighter and louder. The mids just feel a little bit cleaner. You have the low end coming through the middle of the mix and the higher bits just a little bit wider in the mix. Number 15, as usual, I saved the best for last, and this is going to be pulling the MIDI information from a sequencer to use in a different synth. So maybe you have a preset that you love in one of your synths, but that synth doesn't have a sequencer or an arpeggiator, or maybe the sequence you like, but you don't really like the sound. You can actually take the sequence from the first synth and use that MIDI to write out the melody of the second synth. So let me show you what I mean. I have this Anna 2 preset called I Feel Dove, and it comes with a sequence already on the preset. You should recognize this melody right away. So what I can do is get rid of all this MIDI information, put a MIDI note here, press legato, and that's just gonna bring this all the way to the end of my MIDI clip, and then duplicate that over. When I play this, because it's a sequence, I only need to press one note for it to play out that sequence. Next, I go into my other lead that I want to control with the sequence. I have to make sure my arm record button is pressed, otherwise it won't work. And I have the MIDI information here. I'll go into the other view, change the MIDI from to the Anna to Dove, and then I change this post effects to Anna 2. This is going to take the MIDI information sent from the sequencer and play this second synth with that MIDI. So now I'm combining both MIDI information from this MIDI clip as well as the first I Feel Dove preset, which also has a sequencer. And then I can just delete this and only have that sequence if I like. Make sure that you turn off this synth, otherwise both will play. And now we have this lead playing the sequence from a different synth. Last but not least, you can actually record this MIDI so that you can see the melody for yourself. If you want to learn more about music production, check out one of these 2 videos right here. And if you like the video, make sure to hit subscribe so you get more videos like this one.